Hello one and all, and welcome to the first episode in what I'm calling the War Thunder Ultimate Starting Guide. Now this is a starter's guide for new players basically, so if you're a new player, hello and welcome to the game. I'm Screezilla, Carl, as also known. So first of all, we're going to look at what you're going to be looking at when you start the game. So when you first start this game, you're going to be given the option to go through to ground, naval or air. So you can choose either tanks, ships or planes. Now this is going on the assumption that you've chosen tanks first of all. Now when you first choose tanks, you're also going to go through the tutorial, and you will have been through that stage if you're at this point of the video, I imagine, so I'm not going to go too much detail on that one, but the tutorial is very good to do. Now if you've not done the tutorial, do it, because it will give you some extra golden eagles that are very useful for purchasing things later down the line, and also once you complete it, you actually get a premium vehicle. Now a premium vehicle is a vehicle that's not in the regular tech tree. So for instance, if you start with America, you get the M24 1st Army Division, so this one here. So it's not, sorry, the M2A4, sorry about that, my brain was not with it there for a second. So you get this vehicle as a premium, and with this it just gives you a little bit of extra bonus for research and experience, and also Silver Lions. So if we look here, you can see that you'll get just towards the bottom of the information card, maximum vehicle research efficiency for ranks 1 and 2 is 225% and 60% for Lions. So it gives you a really good experience boost, so it's a very handy thing. Every nation has one of these. For Germany, for instance, it is the Panzer II Aufsiehdach. For Russia, it's the T-26 1st Government Tank Brigade. For Britain, it's the AR-13 Mark I 3rd Royal Tank Regiment. For Japan, it is the Hargo Commander. However, this may change in the future, but for now we'll go with the Hargo Commander. Italy is the M1340, and then finally for France, it's the H36 Cambrion. So all of these vehicles are things that you will get once you've completed your tutorial and things like that. So it's a very handy little vehicle to have. Now next up we'll talk about your starting position. So when you first start into War Thunder, it's it can be very scary. There's lots of new things and lots of things to look at. There are a lot of things to do. There's also a new patch that's just dropped. Now we're in 1.87 locked on, and these are a lot of new features that aren't going to be a concern to you just yet. However, they will come into sort of use down the line, and there's something that you'll start getting to have to use later in the game, but we're going to focus on your start in the game today. So where do we start? Well, if you have completed the tutorial, as I mentioned before, you now have the chance to enter battles. So first of all, we have 4 choices. There's Tank Arcade, Tank Realistic, Assault Tank Arcade, and there's also Simulator Battle. Now, I will say avoid the Simulator and Arcade Assault for now. These are going to be very tricky to get used to. Simulator is more for very experienced players. You don't get any markers or things like that. Starting the game anew, you're going to be going into Arcade at first. Now Arcade is a very good little battle system because it teaches you how to use a tank, and it's a great way of learning the vehicles. You'll have a bit of snobbery from people sometimes saying that, oh, War Thunder is only War Thunder with realistic battles, but arcade is an absolutely legitimate way of playing it, and it is really fun. With arcade, the vehicles handle differently. Your gun turret turns quicker. You're not penalised for losing all but one of your crew members. You've got more of a chance to hit people. You've got a target. You've got a gunner target position where you can shoot to. It helps you a lot, and it just makes things a lot easier for getting started. Because you get some guidance for the aiming system. It also shows the enemy position. So when you see an enemy, you'll see a red tag and name their heads. Sorry, at the top of their heads. The other thing about arcade is you get free respawns. So it's really good at the start because you'll always have free reserve vehicles. Because as I said, if you completed the tutorial, you'll have your premium as well. So we'll just go to Italy, being one of the newest nations into the game. Now with Italy, we have free reserve vehicles. We have the M1341, the M1343, and the M1342. Now these are all effectively the same vehicle. There are some very slight minor differences, but they are very minor. Now that's because these tanks were all made in succession and they're all very similar to each other. The main difference you're going to notice is just the colours. With these tanks, they're a good way of starting. So you've got a really good little lineup to start with. Then you're going to start to want to research vehicles. With the research, this is where it can become a bit daunting because there's so much to go for. You've got the research tech tree from rank 1 and even rank 7 in some nations. Now with the tech tree, it's sort of laid out so you can go down lines. Now this left-hand line is more for your scout vehicles. Now scout vehicles are light tanks that can go around quite quickly and can outflank the enemy. So you've got the armoured cars in this tech tree as well as having a couple of tank destroyers which are quite fast and mobile vehicles. The middle line is more your main battle tank. So this is your sort of MBT, so to say. So if you go down this line, you're going to start getting things like the Shermans, the P40, the M26, the M47, all the way down to the Ariete, which is the top tank of the Italian tech tree and is a modern tank in itself. The Ariete, of course, being a very new fighting vehicle. This is actually the pre-series, so it's not the top dog yet. But once the new one comes in, it's gonna ruffle some feathers for sure. The next line is your anti-aircraft line, or your SPAA, and these are vehicles that have fast-firing, high-powered guns to take down aircraft. Now, what I would always recommend is try and unlock one of these quite quickly, because it's good to have an anti-aircraft vehicle in your lineup. And then, last of all, we have our tank destroyer line. Tank destroyers are generally casemate vehicles. Now a casemate vehicle is a vehicle that doesn't have a turret. So if we look at the vehicle, you can see that there's no turret to swivel, it just has a gun pointing forwards. Now these vehicles usually have a big powerful gun that's designed to kill tanks. So now we know a bit of a tech tree, we now need to know a bit about the vehicles themselves. So now we know the tech tree, we should get used to some of the controls for these vehicles. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into a test drive. Now this is a really useful feature and something you might not know of as you're new, obviously. Now a test drive lets you test drive the vehicle. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out the premium version of the reserve vehicle. So what we do is we just mouse over it and we get the option to go test drive. Now you also have the option to modify the vehicle, customize the crew option and to change vehicle, but I'll get into those later. So first of all we'll go to our test drive. Now in the test drive it gives you the option to choose a few things. Now first of all, if you have some extra bullets or munitions unlocked, you can choose between those two munitions. Secondly, you can choose what kind of battle, so arcade, realistic, simulator or custom. Custom means you can just change difficulty levels. So what we're going to do is go for arcade, because that's the area where it's best to start. You can change your camouflage, of course, which there's not really much need to. Just use the skins or just user models, and they're things that you'll get used to later in the game. Vehicle modification, reference or current. So reference means that it's a fresh, newly repaired vehicle. Current means you have all the modifications that you currently have in it installed. I'll come to modifications in a little bit of time. Time of day just lets you choose between the time of day, and weather lets you choose the weather. So if you wanted to test drive at night in pouring rain, you could. We click OK, and away we go. So here we are in the test drive, and we're in the sort of shooting gallery. And what we have here are just some enemy tanks lined up in rows that we can test our guns on. Now they have all different tanks here, and they even have some of the higher tier tanks. Tanks that you're not going to have a chance to penetrate in this vehicle. First of all, we should get used to the controls. Now, I assume you know the basics. WASD to move your tank forwards and around. Your mouse is going to move your turret. Spacebar is going to fire your guns. And then the left mouse button is going to fire you a gun. Right mouse button will zoom you in. And this can be useful if you're in a tight spot and you need to look around a little bit closer, or if you're firing your machine guns, because you can just get a little bit better aim on things with that and sort of work out where your shots are going. So it can be a little useful feature. Now secondary, we're just going to go into the controls options, because there's lots of extra controls that you can put on there. Now one thing you can do is you can change to a manual transmission, and this can be good for experienced players because you can change the gears a little bit quicker, you can make your tank go a bit faster. However, I would not recommend that. E and Q are very useful for when you're doing a long travel. It's basically just your automatic transmission, so you basically press E to go up and that will put you in cruise control, so your tank will just go on its own in the selected sort of speed, and then Q to go reverse. We have all our buttons for our guns. We have our secondary guns and our primary guns. Now some tanks have extra guns, and these are tanks later in the tech tree, so sometimes you might need to have a secondary gun. So for instance, with if you had two main guns on your tank, you could press Alt 2 and then you would fire it. So that can be a very handy thing to change. The most important thing though is down here with the binoculars. Now this should be set to B, and B is a very important one to have. Binoculars are very useful. Next up, I would recommend going down a bit further and coming to your rangefinder and pressing N. Now N for rangefinder is a very good one because it's right next to B. You also have V, which is your scouting mechanic. Now the scouting mechanic again is something I will get into a little bit later. There's also the option to do sight distance controls. Now I have this set up as up, down and left to reset it. You can set them to whatever you like. When you first have the game installed, up, down, left, right will be tank controls, so you need to delete them to use this. But it is a very useful feature indeed. So what do I mean by this feature? So if we look at the Tesseract in front of us and we go into our gun view, we can see that if we just pointed our crosshair dead at it, we're going to miss. We need to get the range right. Now luckily in arcade, rangefinder is done automatically for you. So you'll see the numbers on the top of the crosshair moving. You can see it's changed from 506 to 753. And this is the range at which you're firing your shot. So if we look down here, it's only 14 meters. If we look way off into the distance, it breaks. I'm not sure. Sort of around the 1,000 meter mark is about the furthest you're going to get range for. In realistic battles, you need to actually press N, and then that will give you the range for your target. Now, a really useful thing to do with that is, being that we're in arcade, we don't need to worry about it. But say we were in realistic battle, we would press N and range find, and then we'd move our crosshair up. So you can just see the distance. I'm pushing it up to the set distance that it's coming in. Now it only goes up in 50s, so you can only go up to 350, 400, similar things like that. But you can fine adjust it as well, and then I can just set it back to normal with my left key. This is a really useful feature if you're trying to make some fine, very hard to hit shots. So, being that we're in arcade, we don't need to worry about that. Now what we're going to do is just going to drive a little bit closer to the Tesseract. And we've just pressed E a few times just to go into cruise mode. In this mode you can still turn the tank left and right, and the tank will just keep going forwards. It only stops when you brake. So when you brake, you just press S, and that will stop you. And then you can press W to move forwards. So, what I want to show you is in arcade mode, you get this little green marker. And as you saw in the test drive, this means that you're going to penetrate. Now the green marker also can be useful because it means you're guaranteed to penetrate at that spot. You'll also get a yellow marker sometimes. Now yellow is a 50-50 chance of penetrating. And then you've also got things like the red. And red means that you haven't got a chance to penetrate. So, when you're aiming at a tank, you'll want to aim for the green spot. Generally, centre of mass is the best place to shoot because that's where you're going to cause the most damage. Like so. However, sometimes you're going to want to aim for weak spots. Now luckily we've got a Matilda up here. Now the Matilda is a very strong tank. We have a round that can only penetrate around about 52mm of armour. The Matilda has around about 60 to 80mm of armour all the way around it. It's a heavy old tank and very well armoured. And it caused the Italians a lot of problems in the war, as well as the Germans. At the beginning of the war, the Germans and Italians were using tanks like this, while the British had the Matilda here. And as you can see, the Matilda cannot be penetrated by our guns, and that causes a lot of problems. However, there are weak spots. So right here, for instance, on the transmission, we might be able to sneak a shot through. But just because it's green doesn't mean it is going to go through. It has to hit that exact spot to actually go in there. However, we will get some yellow spots. Hopefully, if we get it in the right position. We'll find it eventually. So you may get a yellow spot on the Matilda, or even a green spot on it. Now right here is a weak point. So right here you can see that the little spot where the driver sits basically. And right here we can penetrate. And with that we can kill the driver. However, we can't kill the gunner. So in this situation, you'd kill the driver, the turret would turn, and you'd get a 2-pounder to the face. So what we want to try and do is find a weak spot on the tank that will kill the gunner. Now generally, the neck of the tank is a weak spot. So as you can see here, it's yellow. So there's a 50-50 chance of penetrating. Doesn't mean we will, but we have a chance. However, there is also a bit of a weak spot around this area as well that can be penetrated. But finding those spots can be very hard. And it is sometimes a thing of sheer luck. So right there we found another weak spot. And with that we can kill the loader. We can keep firing in, and we might get lucky and kill the gunner. However, it's not a guaranteed thing. The best thing to do to a tank is get behind it though, because behind a tank is its weakest point. Generally the back of the tank is less armoured than the front. And as you can see here, the very back of this tank has very little armour. So if we shoot here, we take out the engine instantly, and that means the tank can't drive. We've also set it on fire. Now fire is a deadly thing in the tank, and if you don't have fire prevention equipment, you're just going to burn to death. So we're just going to return to the hangar now. So now we know the basics of the controls and shooting. We should learn a bit more about the armour and the vehicles themselves. In the hangar we have that opportunity. We get 3 different types of view. The first one is off, disabling of the view modes. The second one is armour, and the third is X-ray. Now first of all, I'm going to talk about X-ray. Now X-ray removes all the armour and lets you see underneath the skin of the tank. In X-ray view, this lets you find out where the best point to shoot a vehicle is. Say with this tank here, in front of it, if we shot this lower part of the tank, we're going to take out the transmission, and that means it won't be able to move forwards and back. If we shoot dead centre, we're probably not going to do anything to the crew, but we might damage the engine. If we shoot to the left here, we're going to kill the commander, and the commander in this tank is also the gunner. There's this machine gunner here as well, so if we shoot here, we might take out 2 crew members. Or, if we wanted to disable it and take out the driver, we could shoot to the right of it. Now if we were flanking the tank, we can also see here that there's the ammunition. Now if you take out the ammunition, there's a good chance the tank's going to explode. So shooting the ammunition is generally the best thing to do. Now X-ray mode is a fantastic thing to do on tanks that you're having trouble with. If you're finding that you're fighting the British tanks, say, and you're fighting the Tatarak, we go into arcade view, and what we can see here is the best place to shoot is sort of the centre right here, because you're probably going to take out all 3 crew members with relative ease. The British tanks don't have transmissions in the front, so they're easier to penetrate. We can also see that it does have some ammunition storage on the side, but if we shoot right here, we're going to take out the commander and gunner commander and loader, with ease. And we can see the areas where we can shoot them. We can also see sort of what kind of gun it uses. We can see how fast the gun moves and the rate of fire and the angles it has as well, which is very handy. We can also see where its fuel tanks are. So if we wanted to set it on fire, we could aim for those fuel tanks and cause a fire in a tank. And as I said, if you don't have fire prevention equipment, you will die from that. Now next up, we have the armour viewer, and this is very useful to find out how much armour a tank has. So you're going to see in the stat card to the left here the actual values. So the armour thickness of the front, side and rear is 16mm. So if we look here, 16mm of thickness. If we look at the front here, it's only 10mm. However, it's stronger than the armour here, which is only 16mm, and that's because it's at a slope. Sloped armour makes it effectively thicker. So I'm going to use my phone for example. So if my phone's flat, the shell's going to go straight through, like this. If my shell is at this angle, my shell is going to have to go through this bit, and this is more than this. It basically makes the armour effectively thicker. So the effective thickness of this armour is 24mm, because you're going to have to push through that armour. It also causes an angle, so there's a chance the shell will ricochet and bounce off as well. Now you see a few different colours in the armour view. We've got orange, yellow, or greenish yellow, light green, red, and sometimes green as well. So there are a few different colours. Now the light green is the sort of thinnest armour. The greenish yellow is the next thickest armour. So you can see here, if we look down, this armour is a little bit greener than this armour. So this is only 7mm and this is only 10mm. We've got orange, which is your tracks, which are effectively 15mm of armour. And then we have red, which is the thickest part of the armour, which is 16mm of armour. So this tank has effectively 16mm of armour as its thickest part. The next thing that we can do in armour is protection analysis, and this is something that is superb. protection analysis is going to be very useful for you. If you keep facing a Tesseract and keep bouncing off of it, then you can learn where to shoot it. So we'll go back to our Italian tank. So the threat is the vehicle that we're using, say, or the vehicle that you're facing. The rank, of course, is the tank, and the tank is the M1342. So that's the tank we were using. Now you can change the shell. The shell we were using was the Granata Perforate Mod 35. There is also the Granata Perforate Mod 39. And these shells have different penetration values, and they also have slightly different ricochet values as well. So it does change slightly. The shell works a little bit differently, basically. You can also see how fast the shell moves. So if you look at muzzle velocity, 630 meters per second is quite fast. They both have the same amount of speed. One is an armor-piercing high explosive shell, and one is an armor-piercing ballistic cap shell. Now, shells are things that I will get into in a moment, but they do differ a lot. So we'll go for the shell we were using, which was the high explosive. Now, we were shooting at, say, 500 meters. So that means we've got 40 millimeters of armor penetration. Now, we were shooting from this angle here. And as you can see, shooting at this angle makes this area pretty much impossible to penetrate. We can press the left button to fire, and we'll get a diagram of what happens. Then, as you saw, we have the side-on shot. So you can press that, and you'll see here the shell goes in and takes out the two loader and the commander. But say we were facing it from the front and having trouble. Now we'll actually change vehicle here, and we will go and look at the Matilda, what we were facing before. Now if you actually own a vehicle, to get into the armor view mode, you can go into it by customization. So you click here and go to customize. This also allows you to customize the look of your vehicle. Now you'll see my Matilda is covered in bushes. This is something that's a premium extra, and I have a few of them laying around, so I generally cover my tank in bushes to make it a little bit more stealthy. However, we're not going to worry about that now. We're just going to go to armor and protection analysis. Now this is a rank 2 vehicle, but we were facing it with a rank 1 vehicle. So we'll switch down to our rank 1 and we'll switch to the tank we were using. So, as you can see, we've got very little chance of penetrating. But we did have a couple of little spots when we were actually very close in these areas. Now we were at a distance of pretty much 0 meters, so as close as we possibly could get. So as you can see, we can penetrate here. Now that may not kill the commander and the loader, it may just injure them. Now you can also see from the front, a bit hard with the bushes on I know, that we can't really penetrate any areas here. However, there is a driver's port just back here, and there is a section that you can penetrate. If we could get our mouse directly over it. So right here, we can penetrate it by the shell ricocheting into the tank and then causing it to basically explode. So it's a bit of a risky shot, and it's something you're not generally going to be able to do. But we also have the neck of the tank. So again, we can shoot that and take it out quite easily. The turret ring is the easiest spot to penetrate on pretty much every tank there is, even down to things like the modern tanks. So even down to things like the Challenger 2. We'll go to preview. If it's a tank you don't own, you can preview it. And we can go to protection analysis, and we'll just go back to our trusty Italian rank 1 tank, and right here it's a little bit difficult on this tank because it's a very chunky tank. the turret ring is the sort of weakest point, so you can sort of, if you manage to get in underneath there, you've got a chance of actually going through and killing the tank. Now, it's pretty much no hope in hell. It's not a chance you're going to have ever, really, but it can be done. So you can absolutely penetrate this tank. The other thing as well is actually the side of the tank is very weak as well. So in theory, you could kill this tank with the rank 1 tank. But you have to play around with protection analysis to work out where to shoot it to actually cause that damage. But as I said, you're not going to be facing these. This was just a silly example. So, the protection analysis is very useful, and it will help you in working out how to kill a tank, where to shoot, and also how to protect yourself. Now that's something I didn't go over. So if we go back to Italy, and we go to protection analysis. Now, we keep facing that pesky British tank, the Teterac. Every time we keep facing it. Now, the Teterac has a shell which has 76mm of penetration up close, and a secondary shell that has 92mm of penetration. Now, that shell is very strong. Now, say we were facing it at a long distance, at 900 meters. The shell would be able to pretty much penetrate us everywhere, apart from this little section here. But we're pretty much not going to have a good time. On the side of the tank, however, if we were sort of, say, trying to poke our nose around and see if we could spot the vehicle, we could try and angle our tank. Angling your tank basically, again, means that you've got effectively thicker armour. It also means there's a more chance for a shell to ricochet. So with this shell, let's get it down to 74mm of penetration. So as you can see right now, it's going to penetrate us. If we angle our tank correctly though, it can't penetrate us. Even though it's only 25mm of armour, we can make it so a shell can't penetrate us. And this of course goes for things like the turret. So for instance, you could turn your turret in a way where the shell will ricochet. This is a bit hard with vehicles like the Teterac because they are quite strong and they use an armour piercing ballistic capped shell, which is pretty much a solid shell. These are just solid lumps of metal that are designed to absolutely devastate everything. So let's talk a little bit about modifications. Now, with the modifications for the standard vehicles, you're just going to get parts, fire prevention as standard, but you're going to have to unlock other things. You may have a few other things equipped as standard for you. You have the option of getting the next shell, which you can do absolutely, and that's going to give you a little bit of extra penetration value at some angles. But it's not a huge improvement, but some other tanks do have a huge improvement with shells, for instance. You can also get crew replenishment, which is a great thing to have in arcade, because that means if you get shot and lose all your crew but one member, you'll be able to get a second person come into your tank instantly, and you'll still be able to fight. If you lose all your crew members, however, you're not going to be able to keep doing that. In realistic battle, if you lose all but two of your if you lose all your crew down to one crew member, you're effectively dead. You can't do the same trick. You need two members remaining in your tank at all time. There's also things like the horizontal drive, and this is your turret turn rate, your fire adjustment, so the adjustment of fire, and this is going to make the horizontal weapon spread and the vertical weapon spread narrower. So the shell is going to go where you want it to go. It's going to have less divergence. So whenever you fire a shell, there's always a chance it's going to go a slightly different way than you thought it would. It's generally going to go in the right direction, but sometimes it will veer to the left, to the right, up or down, and this is going to lower that chance. The elevation mechanism is how quickly your gun goes up and down, and it also helps for vertical weapon spread. And then finally we have artillery support down this line. Artillery is a system that you can use in the map. Now what we're going to do is we're going to jump to a different tank now, I'm going to turn off the armour analysis, and we're going to jump to the M22, which is a tier 1 tank in the American tech tree. So if you were grinding in the American tech tree, you would get this after the LVT. So let's say we've got this tank, and we want to take it out for a realistic battle. First of all, what we're going to do is we're going to go for a test drive in realistic battle conditions. Now, as you can see, there's a few different shells we can choose. We've got the M74B1, the M63 high explosive, and the M51B1B2. Shells have lots of boring names. Now, this is an armor-piercing ballistic capped. An armor-piercing capped ballistic capped shell. So basically, it's a pure armor-piercing shell. There's no explosive value in it. This is just an armor-piercing shell, so it's a pure shell that's just designed for armor-piercing. It's just basically a bit of metal. The ballistic cap shell has a little cap on it that's just designed to sort of penetrate a little bit quicker. So it's a more pointy shell basically. And then high explosive is a shell that has a lot of explosives in it. High explosive though doesn't have much penetration value, so it's not really much use. So let's go for the test drive. So here we are in a test drive in Locust. Now the Locust is a very fast, nimble tank, but what we have on it is artillery. So what artillery does is it gives you this option here for an overview of the map, and what you can do is call down an artillery strike. So what we're going to do is call artillery on that Panzer II there. Now artillery isn't very accurate, so as you see the shells are going to hit in random positions. It's a very random system. Sometimes it will kill a tank, other times it might damage it, sometimes it will do nothing at all. But it is a very useful feature for when somebody's capping a zone. And when I say capping a zone, it's taking over, say, the A, B or C cap. So that's the artillery. So we're just going to hop out of this. Now one thing that this vehicle has is actually something called scouting. Now scouting is a mechanic that was introduced recently, and scouting is a special mechanic that lets you spot enemy targets. It's mainly useful for realistic battles, because in a realistic battle you don't have name tags. So right now we're in a realistic battle. First of all, you're going to see the map. So we're on the Sinai map, which is a desert map. So we can sort of see some areas where there's some paths, and we can also see the caps. So there's A and B. So these are the areas which you want to capture. If you capture them, you're going to win the game. So once we're finished loading, we'll jump into this game eventually. So we're going to take out our M22 first. Now in realistic battle, you can see we can actually take a plane out. Now planes are something that, again, I'll get into in a bit more detail in another episode. But first we're going to take out the M22. Now we don't want to have full ammunition, because if we have full ammunition, it means that we're probably easier to kill. Because in battle you can press O to see the X-ray. As you can see, if we have full ammunition, there's more of it. So there's a bigger chance that we're going to get blown up, basically. Now what we're going to do is we're going to drive and try and find a spot to sort of hide in. We can use our binoculars to look as we drive. And binoculars are very useful for spotting people because they've got a bit more distance on them than your gun does. Now there's a path leading round the corner here, and this could have enemies down it. So we're going to try and get to a position where we can basically stop their advance or sneakily kill them. Now luckily in this tank we're very, very fast, so we're probably going to get here before any enemies. However, somebody beat us to it. So right there, as you see, we got beaten to the mark by somebody that was a bit faster than us. very good job there. Frustrating because I didn't get a chance to show off the scouting mechanic. Now we know that tank is around the corner now. We've respawned because we have just enough spawn points to get into another match here. So we're not going to make the same mistake twice. But we need to be in a position that will stop him from coming around and attacking our base. So we're going to move a little bit to somewhere that we can sort of spot. Now there's an enemy right there, we can see. We saw him. We stopped, we used our binoculars, we then aimed, and then we shot. Now if you can pull off shots like that, you're going to do very well in this game. But what I want to do here is just explain a little bit about the scouting mechanic, even though I don't have it. With scouting, with the binoculars say, if we find an enemy, we can then press V. We need to have the cross of the binoculars over the target. If we have that, then we're going to make them appear on the map. Now as you saw, with the tank that we just killed, it didn't have any marking above it, and that's because enemy tanks don't get tank markers, only friendly tanks do. Now I'm going to push forward a little bit here. Now we can see there's some machine gun fire going on there, so there's obviously a tank in that position. So what we could do is start unloading our artillery. There's also a tank coming along here. Terrible shot. Terrible shot. Into the turret. Into the turret. And he's dead. You generally want to aim for turrets. Or the centre of the tank. To kill them. Now obviously we've been spotted now by the other enemy tanks. So we're in a bit of a sticky situation right now. What we're going to do is we're just going to sit here. And we're facing a French tank that's very hard to penetrate right now. We're going to shoot his gun, and we've taken out his gun so he can't shoot us. We got very lucky there, we had a friend that helped us. We know there's another tank around the corner here. Didn't aim the shot properly. He's used his smoke, but we know where he is. I think he's actually dead, so that's all good. Now we've sustained a little bit of damage here, but we're still okay, we're still moving. And we're going to march our way around here so we can stop the enemy flanking us. So we've cut the enemy off from flanking us and getting to the point to basically get to our spawn to kill us there. So that's a really good thing to do in a match because it's going to be very helpful. I wish I'd been able to show you the scouting mechanics, but unfortunately not. Now we've lost a couple of crew members, but luckily this tank is made up of humans. So we have quite a few crew members left still. Now what we're going to do here is just very tentatively look around the corner. And we can't really see anybody. You can see some shots over there. So we're going to slowly come up here. I'm going to use our binoculars, because the binoculars are higher than us, so we can actually see sort of as if we were standing outside of the tank. We can see a little bit higher. So we can see over ridgelines and crests. Look around, just check the corners. Always check your corners. Now what we're going to do is we're going to climb up this hill. And we know that there's a tank near B, because we saw our friends get taken out. So we're going to be very careful around here. We're going to show the front of our armour. We also know that there's that anti-aircraft gun to the right of us. Now that can be very dangerous. But currently, he won't be able to get a shot on us. It seems our friendly tank is taking out that anti-aircraft gun. one's distracted, we're going to come up over the hill. And hopefully this guy's going to be distracted enough, and there's only going to be sort of one or two of them. Taking out that tank. That one's dead. Now we're in a hard to hit spot right here. Let's take out the loader. And just need to get that hit a little bit to the side to take out the gunner. But somebody's managed to outflank us. So, it's always tricky positions. If you're firing at one person, you've got to really be careful. Now we have got another tank to take out. We've got the M2A4. And we're going to choose a different spawn location this time. You can choose left or right, so we're going to choose this one. Now we know there was a tank to this left hand side, so we're going to be a bit cautious. We're going to go and try and find it. Now when you get shot, you get basically a kill camera that shows you where you got shot from and how you died. Now this is useful sometimes because it will actually show you the enemy's location, which is something I do not agree with in the game, but it is there, and it is a mechanic that can be used. But it's also good because it shows you where your tank got penetrated, so next time you can try and do things a little bit differently. Try and make it so the tank isn't as easy to hit. Or you hide that weak spot by going round in a different way. You keep the side of your tank open a bit more, you sort of change position a little bit more. Now we're just going to stop here for a moment, and we're just going to use the binoculars just to have a little look around. Now we're going to move up to this rock formation next. Now this is something that does take a long time to get used to, is the different areas and places that tanks tend to hang out. This is something that will only come with experience. There we go, see the enemy tank there. And it's our good friend, the Italian tank from before. And he's actually managed to get a really good shot off there. So, as you can see, it's not always simply killing a tank with, you know, one shot. However, sometimes you will knock a tank out, but it can still fight back. So it's a battle of attrition. With realistic battle, the more tanks you kill, the more damage you do, the more tanks you have to play with, because you get what's called spawn points. Now at the moment I have quite a lot of spawn points, because obviously I killed a few tanks and things like that. It could be that the enemy's running out of spawn points now, and they may only have a couple of tanks left. As you can see here, people with a little parachute or a head next to them aren't currently in game. We'll slowly move up to our spot. Now the tank that shot us before used an armor-piercing high explosive shell. So it was a shell that had explosives in it, hence why it killed us so quickly. We, on the other hand, were using an armor-piercing shell. And with a straight armor-piercing shell, it means that you have to actually hit the target, because you're not going to do as much damage to the enemy, say. So when you penetrate somebody with just a pure armor-piercing shell, it's shrapnel damage, and also all cross. Aha, I see you. Just behind the tent there. Jesus Christ, this guy's got like 9 lives. There we go. He's finally dead. fantastic play there, Doga. I imagine he's actually quite a high-skilled player. He seemed to know what he was doing. You do get a lot of high-skilled players playing low-tier tanks sometimes, just because they are fun to play. You know, and that's the thing about War Thunder, is there's so many different eras of tanks. If you want to play the very early war tanks, you can, and there's no harm in doing that. If you want to play the modern tanks, you can, and there's no harm in doing that. It's very handy to have. It is a game mode that you will do well in sometimes, and as you can see, you know, 7 kills, and even though we're going to lose that battle, you know, went quite well. But it's also very tricky. Now, the last thing to talk about is just about the shells. So with the shells, you'll see in the tank that you have many different shells. We're going to start off with AP. So AP is just on the left hand side at the top, and it's just a solid shot shell. It does have a tracer in it, so you can see where it's going. Next we have AP-HE, and it's an AP shell filled with high explosives. It then has a base fuse at the back that will explode once the shell penetrates. We have armor piercing capped. Now, armor piercing capped is an armor piercing shell, and then it has an armor piercing cap on top. The armor piercing cap is designed to basically do a bit more damage, so it goes through first with that cap, and then the armor piercing shot follows through, so it has more penetration. Then we have armor piercing cap, ballistic cap. Now, ballistic cap has a slight explosive in it. Then there is the armor piercing cap and the armor piercing shell with the HE in it. Then we have HUP, which is a high velocity armor piercing shell, and it's a composite rigid shell, so it's a light metal and it has a hard case, and it's a very fast shell indeed. Now, in game we also have the heat shell, which is a shaped charge, the high explosive anti-tank. So what this does is, up in the top here there's a little bit of empty space, then there's a cavity, and then it's full of explosives and sort of copper, which will basically melt and then go through the tank. So imagine it like a big bolt of metal that melts its way through the tank. Standard HE round, which is just a high explosive round with a fuse at the top, so it explodes on impact. There are a few shells that we don't have in game in this diagram. Smoke, which is an HE burst shell, and then you get smoke from it. The shrapnel shell, which is basically a shell that has ball bearings in it. When it penetrates the tank, it explodes, and then those ball bearings go everywhere. So it's a very devastating shell against anti-personnel. There is also the discarding Sabo shell. Now, discarding Sabo is basically a shell that comes out of a separate shell, so it's a smaller shell from the barrel. Once it was released, the Sabo disappears, and the shell then goes at a very high velocity. Then we have the fin stabilized discarding Sabo, and these are basically rods that penetrate a tank and cause a lot of damage. So if you're unsure which shell is which, just hover your mouse over the shell in the garage, and you'll be able to tell which shell it is, and it will also give you how much penetration it has. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to conclude this episode and say we're done. What I'd like to say is, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you need any help with things, let me know, because I can put it into the next episode or another episode. Next time I'm going to be talking more on what to progress with, what lines to go down, what tanks to use, what are the better vehicles to use at the lower ranks, so rank 1 and 2. So I'll be going through that video next time. I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have, please give my channel a subscription. I would appreciate that one a lot. Like and comment as well. Share around if you want. There's also a Discord below. Come join the Kaiju Club. In there I can help you as well and answer any questions you have. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you all next time.